Today we welcome back Newcastle United legendary commentator Mick Lowes back onto the channel. Mick is a regular throughout the months and he's going to be coming back talking to myself and Owen about the possibility of a Newcastle United takeover. Right, hi everyone, welcome back to Newcastle Fans TV. Again, we've got another guest for you and is the legend that is Mick Lowes. How we doing, Mick?
Pretty good, mate, in the circumstances. I don't think this is a particularly nice time for anybody. Yeah, it's just nice to speak to the Northeast and Newcastle fans in general at what is, as we say, a very, very testing time. And stay and keep well, all of you black and whites out of there, please.
Hopefully, fingers crossed about the takeover as well. We've got Owen who's going to be coming and joining the video a little bit later. But Mick, you've seen it. You cannot escape the headlines. It's everywhere. It's on local press, national press, the media now.
Yeah.
This has got do you think this has got a bit more legs, this takeover now?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of it, Lee. I think, you know, having been through many of these over the years, some more idiotic than others, some absolutely ludicrous, some that seem to have a little bit of reality about them. This one seems like the real deal. I mean, I must admit the one involving Amanda Staveley, a year or so ago, seemed very similar. But I think the difference with this one is paperwork has been posted. The Premier League are involved. We're told that deposits are in place. So it does seem like this is a little bit more concrete, that this is one which, you know, could be the real deal. And if you think about Mike Ashley and the way that Mike Ashley wants to do business, regardless of his financial state of affairs, you know, it's almost the perfect scenario for him, because not only did his buying of the club go under the radar, you know, 1 minute we'd never heard of him, the next minute he was owner of the club. But it looks like his sale of the club is going to go largely under the radar as well, because, you know, quite rightly, it's getting no column inches. It's getting no real television publicity because of what's going on in the real world. So, you know, I suspect that suits him as well. The fact that a lot of this has been done very quickly. It's been done without a lot of fuss. And I think he wants to get it done more than anything else. So you know, you have to think, touching wood, etc., that this might be the time that we see Mike Ashley say goodbye to Newcastle.
Mike Ashley be remembered for at his tenure at Newcastle?
Not an awful lot is the bottom line. I mean, you know, simply because we were never in a relationship with Mike Ashley. You know, we were in a relationship with Kevin Keegan. We were in a relationship with Sir John Hall. You know, Freddie Fletcher had the club at heart. Freddie Shepherd had the club at heart. Russell Cushing had the club at heart. You know, hundreds of people over the years who've either worked for this football club or owned this football club have had the club at heart. He's never had the club at heart. And it's been shown in this particular instance that the time that he decides to sell it is largely down to the fact that he's having to sell it in order to protect the thing he loves most. And the thing he loves most is Sports Direct, because it's his baby. I mean, to be fair to him, you know, if either any one of us created a business and we also then subsequently bought other businesses, the business we'd go back to and the business we'd want to try and protect as much as any other is the one that made us the money in the first place, is the one that we created. So I can see why he wants to he wants to try, I don't know if save's too strong a word, but he certainly wants to protect Sports Direct from the economic slump that's going to come as a result of COVID-19. But in terms of what he'll be remembered with and remembered for at Newcastle United, you know, my bottom line answer would be absolutely nothing, and certainly nothing good. You know, the guy very quickly fell out of love with Newcastle, and Newcastle very quickly fell out of love with him.
Yeah, we're going to go all the way through what people in the stadium and stuff like that. But
absolutely,
the positives coming in then, Amanda Staveley, I want to touch upon her first, Mick, is that this is our third attempt. If this does go through, credit where credit is due. She's a stubborn lady. She's after what she's wanted, which is a Premier League club.
And it's a good point you make, Lee, because she hasn't thrown the towel in. You know, regardless of who she's dealing with in the Middle East, and which arm of which Saudi Arabian family she's working with or whoever she's working for, the lady herself has shown a tenacity and has shown a determination to get involved with Newcastle United. And I think that's very important. I think it would be easy for potential owners, and I'm sure it's happened in the past, to come along, have a look at Newcastle, have a little bit of a dabble with Newcastle. But once they got shown the door, or once they got told that he doesn't want to do business, and he slammed the door in their face fairly unceremoniously last time, she's come back again. They've come back again. So they see potential. They see a desire to want to get involved with Newcastle United. And I think that's very big. I don't think I've heard that mentioned by too many people. The fact that these people have stuck at it. I am a great believer. I'll temper this by saying sometimes it is better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But at the same time, the fact that they've continued to pursue Newcastle United, I think can only be a positive. So, in terms of Amanda Staveley and the Reuben brothers and whoever, fair play to them. Fair play to them. They've kept going. They've wanted Newcastle. And it's like anything in life, Lee. Wanting to be loved and being loved is a big, big part of it. And as I said to you earlier, Mike Ashley never had a relationship with Newcastle. There was never that love affair that there was with Kevin, etc. Hopefully these people will generate that sort of relationship.
Touch upon the communication, I think they'll sort that out straight away. Just simple little tweaks where they'll get the fans on board. But what do you make of the report that Staveley will get 10%, the Reuben brothers will get 10%, and then the rest is all coming from the South?
Yeah. I mean, these are the areas, Lee, where we really don't know. I mean, these are the areas where all you can do is look at rich lists. All you can do is look at how much, the PIF are worth, how much the sovereign state of Saudi Arabia is worth. There's a crown prince involved there. Ironically, I've spoken to many a Newcastle manager over the years who, when we come to talk about or come to preview the Manchester City game at the weekend, for instance, they say, well, how can we compete when we're up against the wealth of a sovereign state? We're not up against the wealth of an Abramovich or a Mike Ashley even. We're up against the wealth of a sovereign state. Well, that's what Newcastle have potentially waiting around the corner, that level of wealth. Now, how they divvy it up, how they split it up, whether the Saudis have 80% control, the Reuben brothers and Amanda Staveley have 10% apiece. I don't think we should care about that. I don't think we should worry about it. I mean, we never really worried, how the ownership of the club was divvied up under Sir John and Freddie Shepherd and people like that. All Newcastle United fans and all we want, from this deal is the sort of security and the sort of spending power that we haven't seen for a long time. I'm not going to say we've never seen, because we've had this conversation before. Back in the day, we were the big spenders. Back in the early 90s, we were the big spenders. We were the standard bearers. We've fallen foul of the fact that everybody else has accumulated either owners or business partners who have taken their wealth to a different level. Hopefully, if this goes through, Newcastle will be at that level. So, exciting times potentially, but I've been through it so many times, Lee. I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when the chairman walks out and with Amanda Staveley on one side and the Reuben brothers on the other side. And let's not forget as well, because I know we're here to talk about the ownership, and we're here to talk about the Takeover League, but football's a million miles away from my mind at the minute. And I think any football fan, who's serious with himself is not contemplating them walking out in black and white shirts. And, that's for the future. At the minute, there are more serious things than football to worry about, but they are hopefully potentially exciting times ahead.
I've got two questions before I hand to Owen. The first one is, it's been brought up probably the last 48 hours, is the human rights side of things.
Yes.
Saudis involved in. Should Newcastle fans really care about that?
They should care. They too right, they should care. But it's a difficult one. because societies and cultures further afield, have their problems in the way that they deal with people. On an individual basis, it's hard to argue that Mike Ashley was the best businessman and the best dealer of people in the. Everybody has their foibles. They do have some serious issues, but quite how Newcastle United get involved in that, quite how Newcastle distance themselves from it, I don't know. But it's not, there's a lot of what happens in Saudi Arabian life that isn't particularly pleasant and isn't particularly clever. But this is them buying a football club in the northeast of England. I don't see, I think if Newcastle were operating in the Middle East and were condoning it more over there, then maybe there would be a major issue. But it's not right. It's not ideal. Let's put it that way.
Mick #cans. What will the city be like if we get rid of Mike Ashley? The ownership comes in.
I don't want to be the harbinger of doom and gloom. I don't want to be the party pooper Lee, but again, over the years, I've said many, many times, the devil you know, the devil you don't. I'm not questioning what they might or might not do. I'm not suggesting what they might or might not do. What I'm saying is we don't know what they might or might not do. We don't know their motives 100%. We have to wait until the deal is done. We have to wait until they have ownership of Newcastle United. We have to wait until we see their blueprint. We have to wait until we see what they've got to say about the club. And we've got to see whether they are honourable people and they are genuinely in it for footballing reasons. Manchester City have been very clever and very good at marrying both the relationship with the people of Manchester and their ownership of the football club. But don't forget, Manchester City are in the middle of a hell of a wrangle with UEFA and FIFA, which could see them miss out on European football for 2 years, could lose players who aren't going to be playing in the Champions League. So, don't forget Manchester City are in the middle of a bit of a problem with football's governing bodies. Now, is that going to happen to Newcastle for the same reasons? We don't know. I agree, though, potentially, as I've said all along, it is hugely, hugely exciting. But let's not think that for a minute, by this time next year, Newcastle are potential champions. And that's if the world of football looks anything like it's looked previously. We don't know how football's going to look in 2 months' time, never mind 2 years' time, and in 6 days' time, never mind 6 months' time. So let's just hang fire a little bit. Let's just be grateful and hopeful that these people who seem to have a commitment and seem to have a passion for Newcastle United follow it through, show Mike Ashley the door, get their feet under the table at St James's, smarten the ground up, smarten the training ground up, and then start looking at players and then start trying to get Newcastle back where they deserve to be and where they need to be at the top end of the Premier League.
Owen, I'm going to bring you in and I'll come back to you shortly, Mick. So Owen, I'll let you take over.
Okay. The other day we had Matthew Racebeck on. The video's not out yet.
He's rubbish, by the way. I'm joking.
Funny enough, that's my first question, actually.
Yes.
Obviously, we had him on the other day. And to be quite honest, he had nothing but kind words to say about you. You're clearly someone that he really looks up to.
Okay.
How do you think he has done personally since he's become the commentator on the BBC? And what sort of relationship do you have with him?
I suppose the relationship I have with him is, I think mentor's too strong. I think I'm just somebody who's given him a nudge. I think I'm somebody who's given him a helping hand. A lot of what you learn in life, and particularly in what you learn in commentary, etc., it can be a little bit subliminal. You don't know you're doing it, but you do copy people. I copied people. I picked up phrases from commentators that I liked. So, sometimes you don't even know you're doing it. But when I handed over the reins, all I'll say is I was, delighted to hand them over to him, because of everything he was about, his diligence, his knowledge, his love of Newcastle United. And I had absolutely no problems handing over the reins. When you ask me what sort of a job he's doing, the biggest problem I have, Owen, is that I don't hear him enough. I'm out of the area. If I still lived in Newcastle, I would say, yeah, he was good last week. I do tend to listen. I listen occasionally to the matches, and I listen to Total Sport on a Monday night. And I've sent him a couple of texts and a couple of voicemails saying, nailed it. There's been a couple of goals where, and in your own heart when you've done great on a goal and you've come up with just the right words and captured the moment, and he's done that. And to start doing that within 2-3 years of taking over is pretty good. I'm sure it took me longer to be confident enough and be good enough to put the right words in the right order at the right time, because that's what it's all about. It's about everything coming together. But he's good at what he does, and and to be honest with you, I'm just thinking about this now as I'm speaking. I'm happy for him that this takeover's happening, because if it does signal good times, if it does signal good news, if it does signal happy times, a commentator's job is an awful lot easier when A, you're happy, B, the fans are happy, and C, more importantly, the team are doing well and the team are looking good. I was absolutely blessed to have some of the years I had, and people can never take that away from me. But I had some stinkers as well, and Mike Ashley was involved in an awful lot of that as well. So, from a commentator's point of view, he will be very excited. I had KK, I had the signing of Shearer, I had Sir John, I had Newcastle as everybody's second team. Hopefully, he'll have that sort of era. He'll have that sort of time with a football club, because as you two know, and we all know, and anybody close to Newcastle knows, and the city of Newcastle upon Tyne, when the football's going well, when the football's good, when the entertainment's good, the results are good, what a place to live, what a place to work, So, as I say, hopefully, touching wood yet again, Matthew has got a few good days ahead of him, enjoying his work, because it can be far from enjoyable when all you're doing is the harbinger of doom and gloom.
You retired in late 2016.
Yeah.
It must have been a big chunk taken out of your life. Do you miss it, or is it a nice relief to have off your shoulders?
I mean, I've always thought it's a cliche that people say, "Oh, I've no regrets." That's a nonsense. Everybody's got some regrets. Everybody's got something that they regret, or several things that they regret in life. But I wouldn't have stopped doing it. I wouldn't have finished if I knew I was going to regret it. I mean, I might be a lot of things, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face. I'd fallen a little bit out of love with it, as I've said there. I mean, let's put it this way: if when I was beginning to think, is this right for me? If a £300 million buy came along and 200 odd billion, pounds worth of wealth was sitting potentially in terms of an investment into Newcastle, I might have changed my mind. But at the time, it was the right time. I'd done 25 years, and I'd had some very, very, very good years, and I couldn't see at that moment in time those years either being replicated anytime soon or being surpassed. So, there might have been a little bit of selfishness about it, but I don't care about that, because at the end of the day, we all have to look after ourselves. We all have to look after, our own mental health. We all have to look after our own well-being. And it was a good time for me to finish. But as I say, I don't miss it. I miss the tune. I miss the fans. That's why I'm up all the time. If I could get up every weekend, I'd come up every weekend. No, I don't miss it. And I know, going back to your first question, I've left it in very capable hands.
Newcastle could change a lot with the possibility of the upcoming takeover, which has the possibility of, providing Newcastle fans with loads more great moments like you added on earlier. Are there any moments specifically or games that you look back on and you think, yeah, I was really glad that I was able to commentate on that and oversee that?
If I gave you and Lee a piece of paper and said, write down Mick Lowes' top 6 games, you'd probably come up with the same 6 as me. So you'd come up with Barcelona, you'd come up with Manchester United, you'd come up with the cup finals, you'd come up with, off the top of my head, Croatia Zagreb early on and qualification for the Champions League. The standout games were the standout games, but more than that, it was week in, week out, and it wasn't just about the matches. It was about going down to Maiden Castle and waiting outside to interview, some of the great players and some of the nicest guys, and the way that the club was run, and it was a different time. I mean, I've been over this a lot in the past, but the one thing I would say about Matthew Raisbeck is he works in a completely different environment to the one I worked in. Absolutely a million miles away from when, even in the halcyon days, even in the days of Champions League, access to players was so much more. Even you boys, you have to jump through hoops to try and get permission to do this and permission to do that. Back then, you didn't wing it, but you had a lot more space and a lot more room for manoeuvre with players. And press officers get a lot of stick, but press officers are just doing their job as well. It goes right to the top. And, I think we touched upon it in the first part of the interview. If they can get the communication right, these people, if they can get the relationship between the club and the fans right, that will be one of the biggest things they do, because I've seen that eroded over the years. And the sort of disenfranchised supporters who are out there who don't want anything to do with Newcastle United, but don't want anything to do with them through any fault of their own or because they've fallen out of love with Newcastle. They've just become absolutely bemused and disenchanted with the world of big time football. And if this lot, in the same way that Manchester City have managed seemingly to bridge that divide between the local community, the local society, and the Manchester City fans, and a huge amount of wealth at the football club, if they can marry those two together like they have at the Etihad, then that would be great. And that would if they want, my first piece of advice to these people would be, for God's sake, get the fans back on board straight away. Have the parties outside the ground before the game. Make a real effort to reward these people who have essentially kept this club afloat for the last 10 years, certainly the last 10 years. 50,000 every week, when, believe me, many other football clubs and many other sets of supporters would have turned their back on the football club, having been presented with what they've been presented with. And
you mentioned sticking with the club. I mean, you only have to look down the road at Sunderland. I mean, they did stick with their club, and now look where they are, 2 leagues below.
There are a lot of commentators who pick up easy brownie points from football fans by slaughtering their near neighbours and their near rivals, and there's been many commentators, black and white commentators, while I've been at either the BBC or Metro, who've taken cheap shots at Sunderland on air, just to try and curry favour with Newcastle fans. But believe me, they have good support down there, and a little bit like I always say about football fans who have a go at footballers for the way they behave. I always say to them, put your hand on a stack of Bibles and tell me you would behave properly if you were being paid the amount of money they're being paid, or if you were a multi-millionaire at the age of 21. Tell me you would act like a human being. Now, I say the same about Sunderland fans. Newcastle have never been at that level. You see, again, if you want a measure of Newcastle United, they've never been in the old third division. They've never been in the third tier of English football. So we don't know how Newcastle would react. And Sunderland have been through this, and they've been through it more than what, they're going through it. And all right, the crowds have dropped off, but would the same happen at Newcastle? Again, put your hand on a stack of Bibles and say it wouldn't. and been mismanaged and had bad managers and had the sort of strife that they've had. Again, devil you know, devil you don't. So I don't want to turn this into we've now got more money than Sunderland. Let's not do the one thing I always feel that Sunderland do. I do feel they've got a big black and white chip on their shoulder, and they should worry more about themselves than what the boys up the road are doing. And I don't want Newcastle fans to get more obsessed with putting one over on Sunderland just because they're potentially now going to be a very wealthy club, and Sunderland are going through it. So let's not go down that tribal route. Let's just take this for what it is. This is a massive opportunity, and hopefully an opportunity that is realised, and hopefully an opportunity that bears fruit.
Brilliant. Love speaking to you. Mick obviously pops on the channel every 2 to 3 months. If you haven't seen his little rant outside of Norwich City, go and watch that. There's a link in the description for that. He's smiling because good.
People just text me these days, and I open the text and it just says shambolic. Stay safe, keep safe. Yes, we're all looking at this takeover, and we're all thinking about this takeover, and we're becoming mildly obsessed with this takeover. But at this minute in time, there is something happening in this world that is millions and millions of miles more important than football and 11 people kicking a ball around a football pitch. We're talking about life and death. Keep yourself safe. Stay safe. Keep your distance from people. Do not make journeys that are not necessary. We'll get through this. And when we get through and out the other side, as I've said, out of the darkness, there may be an even greater light. And hopefully, in terms of football and in terms of Newcastle United, it might be a very bright light.
Stay safe, everyone. Protect the NHS. Bye-bye.
You're the night sky trying to make me see your stars, but the dark gets lonely. Now I see violet, I can feel silence, and the dark's all that I see. When your stars have burnt out and your heart makes no sound, I'll find validity on